Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about the harsh reality of your life, that it is your responsibility, that you're now choosing it. Today's episode, is it going to be a harsh one? Maybe not harsh, but some of you may not feel ready to hear it. Some of you may. I'm hoping to reach more of you who are ready to hear this. But some of you might find this a little bit uncomfortable, maybe even a little triggering. Those of you who are not ready to hear it are going to want to reject this notion. I'm giving you this heads up because this is what I also experience as a coach when I'm talking to someone who's not ready to admit this to themselves versus someone who is. And so that's the only reason why I'm saying it like off the top of this episode, is basically just to prepare you that some of you it's just going to ring so true and you're going to just be so ready to accept it and actually do something about it. And for some of you, you're going to want to argue with me about it. You're going to want to defend your stance and the choices that you make or those that you don't. And it's completely fine. You don't have to convince me. We're all on different sort of paths of our journey and different levels of our journey. Don't worry about it. If this doesn't resonate for you today, inshallah, one day it will. So you can always come back to this if you're feeling like maybe there was something about that episode. Let me come back and listen to it. Okay. So no pressure. Okay. So, and if you're not really ready to be called out for certain things, maybe today's episode is not for you. Okay. Just putting in my disclaimers. Okay, sis. Okay, cool. So I saw a video on TikTok a while ago, and yeah, I know, like that's my sort, but like was like it inspired this topic for me because I agree with it, and it's something that I am teaching my clients on a regular and kind of bringing up to my clients on the regular. And I just love that somebody made that video. I don't know if I reposted it or what I did with it because it's a while ago now, but it was this person who came on the video and was like, at some point, you're no longer a product of your environment, you're choosing your own life. And I was just like, yeah, like to me, it just feels like, yeah, but of course. But then I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, actually, I should speak on this because this is something that I'm teaching my clients all the time and the girls in the membership. I'm constantly saying this, like there's a point where you are choosing whether or not you want to let your past dictate for you what to do, or if you make your own decisions, or you're choosing your own future. And it can be difficult to hear for some people, especially if we're still in a state of mind where we feel we need to justify our suffering or our victimhood or victim state by our past. And some of us are still there. And listen, as I said at the top of this podcast episode, that's fine. Not everybody is ready to move on from that, which is why this episode is not for everyone. But, you know, I've got to make it because some of you are ready to hear this and accept it and move past it. The truth of the matter is that after a certain age, and I specifically also for those of us who live in places where, you know, after 18, you can do whatever you want. Like most of us have that. Like, but you know, like you're a grown up by, you know, all senses of the word, and you can go out and choose your own life and do your own things, right? At that point, while the first few years may still be very much heavily influenced by the way we were raised and what our mum and dad would prefer us to do. The truth is that anything after that, you know, you're choosing yourself. And even at that point, you're still choosing for yourself. And I understand that for some people, it's like, yeah, but my past was so full of trauma and all these things. And listen, it's not to say that you can just erase the trauma and everything, but it's your decision what you do with this trauma and how you choose to live your life with this trauma. The thing with trauma is we can never get rid of it. None of us can get rid of our past, whether it was traumatic or peaceful or whatever it might have been. But the thing is, we choose how we deal with it. We choose what we do with it or don't do with it. And unfortunately, many of us have experienced something in our childhood or in our young adulthood that has left sort of like a bit of a foul taste in our mouths, and has perhaps even shaped some unhealthy habits or thoughts or belief sets that we are now taking with us. But the thing is, at any moment, we can choose to look at it differently and we can choose to change it. And one of those things, especially when it comes to something like trauma, and I know I'm going straight in today. Wow, I didn't soften anything. I just went straight in and let's talk about trauma. Um, but again, as I said, this isn't for everyone. We're going to go a little bit hard today, so it is what it is. But especially when it comes to something like trauma, we have a choice. We can actually do something about it. We can choose to work on it through therapy, through if it's something that needs medication. Just like if you have like a physical illness that you may be like, hey, I want to take a medicine that helps make this easier for me to handle, to deal with. Like I'm going to use myself as an example. I've had anxiety and depression pretty much my whole entire life. Like my first full-on panic attack, I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and I remember. I probably had some before that, but that's how early on, like I've had anxiety and depression and panic disorders. And it wasn't until I was like 33, I think, that I started taking anti-anxiety and anti-depression medicine for it, and I was just like, yeah, because I choose how I deal with it. Right now, this isn't a trauma. This is just to say, like we make these decisions for ourselves, how we choose to deal with it. And sometimes with therapy or coaching or psychotherapy or whatever it is that you may need, that is also you saying, I have this with me from childhood. I don't know how to deal with it myself. And instead of sort of allowing it to weigh me down and potentially stop me from living my best life or to the best of my ability, I'm going to go do something about it. I'm going to seek the help that is necessary for me to be able to manage it better. It's not about erasing it or completely forgetting it, or, now this is no longer a thing of my past, but it is utilizing it in a much more beneficial way. And I know, again, even saying this can trigger some of you if you're not ready to do that, because I understand, and I'm going to say this, and again, if you're not ready to hear this, it's going to sound like I'm attacking you, but please believe me when I say that I'm not. And at any moment, if you're finding this episode to be particularly triggering for you, you're more than welcome to stop listening as well. I don't want you to continue listening if you're finding yourself being triggered by this episode. Like, do yourself a favor, pause this episode, come back to it when you're ready, or don't listen to it at all, right? But particularly those of us who are using our past as an excuse to stay stuck. And some of us don't realize we're doing it. Some of us are just doing it, not understanding that we're using it as a clutch. We're using our past, our trauma, the things that happened to us that we were not in control of, as a reason to stay stuck, to not go ahead and do more stuff. And that is why this is a decision, and it's something that we need to challenge ourselves with, to make sure that we're not doing that to ourselves, that we're not using our past and our traumas and our bad experiences to keep us stuck in one place. I'm going to use another example from my own life, and I'm doing this because, especially today, because I don't want to put any of my clients or members out there who have examples of their own. Even though I'm not mentioning names, I just feel like today, with today's topic, it can get a little close. So I'm going to use myself because I have plenty of experiences in my own life. I've lived 100,000 lives apparently, somehow. But that's what makes me a good coach, because I can relate to a lot of things. So before I became a Muslim, before I reverted, I did a lot of stuff, really ugly stuff, and committed so many sins. I'm not saying this as like, oh, I did all that. I'm saying it as in to say, I had a moment to choose. I can allow my past to dictate my future, or I can choose to say my past brought me to this point where I can now make a decision about how I want to spend the rest of my life, and I can change certain things around and no longer participate in certain actions that do not benefit me and do not make me a better person, and actually make me more miserable to be around. And so it's not about my past, it's about what I choose to do with it. So learning from my past, saying, well, I did these things and I experienced these things, and it didn't bring me the kind of happiness I thought it would. It didn't bring me any joy. It didn't bring me the things that I thought it would. In fact, not doing those things are making me happy, are making me more fulfilled in life, are bringing me the kind of contentment and ease and flow and gratitude and mercy that I was looking for. So I'm not allowing that part of my past to dictate who I am and who I will become, inshallah, right? And so while it's slightly different than something like trauma, not that I haven't experienced trauma, I also have some things, I don't really necessarily want to share it on a podcast. It's the same thing, that I can choose to look at it and say, well, this happened to me Ergo, now I have to act according to that. And now I am a victim of my circumstances. And now I have to act accordingly. And so I'm going to use that as my reason to not go ahead and live the best of my lives that I can live, or do the best of my ability, because now I'm leaning up against this past of mine and using it as the excuse not to. And that is when we stay in victimhood, when we stay in victim mentality. But this happened to me. And when we do this, you should talk to a therapist about this, of course, because everybody has their own reasons for doing it. But for a lot of people, when they do this, it is because we still feel like we need to be validated in that, or we feel like we need the other person to do good with what they did wrong. I cannot change this because it happened to me. The other person has the power now. So we give the power away. So we feel like the other person was responsible. So if they were responsible for doing it, how can I possibly then be responsible for making it better or changing it? So we've allocated the power dynamic to that person or thing that happened, instead of saying at any moment I can choose to take that power back and look at it differently, do with that information something that could benefit myself or others, work on it so it no longer takes up as much time in my physical body or in my mind or in my spirituality, and so on and so forth. It is not easy. Please, 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 whatever you do, do not take away from this episode that I'm trying to say it's just easy, just make a choice and do it. That is not what I'm saying. This is a process for a lot of us. It's an active this choice and decision and a follow through that can be very, very difficult, because we have to leave aside a part of our belief system and our way of thinking and being and acting that has given us a sense of comfort, even though it was fake comfort. It felt like we were protecting ourselves when in fact we were just keeping ourselves stuck. And this is why it's important for us to do it, because it's not a question of taking yourself out of a place that feels safe for you. It's about moving yourself along in your journey. So you're not staying stuck in something that is actually not benefiting you, that is actually more harmful to you than if you were to move forward and moving on with your life and doing more and better with it. Okay. As I said, some of you might feel triggered by some of the things that I'm saying in today's episode, especially that you're using this past or this reason as your excuse not to go ahead, because quite often this is a subconscious thing. You're not doing it on purpose. It is literally your brain telling you, I experienced this one time, and now because of this one experience, I have created the belief within me that this is how every single time in similar situations and experiences are going to go down. It is literally because you now have come to the point where you're believing that story, not knowing that your brain, while it's trying to protect you, is actually lying to you, because it doesn't know that for a fact. It's guesstimating, it's assuming based on one or two or a handful of experiences. Right? And then it's taking that and saying, you know what, it's safer for you if you just don't have friends. It's safer for you if you just don't chase your dreams. It's safer for you if you just never speak up for yourself, if you never follow through on anything. It's safer for you just to stay stuck where you are and staying miserable, because that is how it is for you. And that's your brain essentially lying to you. But it's not doing it because it wants to lie to you. It's doing it because it's thinking it's safe. But the truth is, it's not safe there. It's keeping you stuck, and usually it's keeping you kind of sad and miserable and depressed, anxious, stressed, hopeless. Maybe you want more for yourself, but this old story, this old narrative is just keeping you stuck, right? So there comes a point where if you want to move forward, you have to recognize that you're no longer a product of your environment. You're a product of your own choosing. I know that's hard to hear, especially if you're not ready to hear. That's a real hard one to swallow. But really take that in, that at this point, if you're a grown adult at the very least, you're no longer a product of your own environment. You are a product of your own choosing. You are now choosing to stay at that stage. You're choosing to keep believing that story. You're choosing to keep that trauma, that experience, that whatever it might be, backstory. You're choosing to keep that alive. You're choosing to keep that at the forefront of your mind, even if it's on a subconscious level. You're choosing to let that dictate who you are or who you can become. Right? And in reality, if Islam teaches us anything, it's the mercy and forgiveness and the right to start over. Think of it as when a revert enters Islam. You're not coming in and now you have to go back in time and apologize and seek forgiveness for everything that you've done. Do it, absolutely, if you feel so inclined to do it. But Allah already gave it. It's a new page of a new book. It's not even a new page in the same book. It's a completely new book. The old book is gone. It doesn't even exist anymore. Right? So it's the same thing that we can choose to do for ourselves. That is what it shows us. It shows us that at any moment we can choose different. We can choose different. We can choose to start up another book for ourselves. We can start to go down a different path of our life. We can choose a different qadr for ourselves. If anything, being Muslims should feed into that hope in us. It should give us that comfort that Allah has already shown us in so many ways through the religion, that mercy and forgiveness and this opportunity to start again is available to us. And it's not just for reverts, it's even completing a Umrah, or a Hajj. There are so many different ways that we can ask Allah pretty much for like this clean slate, start over, do over again, right? And we can do the same for ourselves, obviously in a much smaller sense than what Allah can do for us. But if you're doing it and you're seeking the help and guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're undertaking this journey, inshallah it'll be easier for you to go through it. It's not going to be easy, but it will be easier inshallah with the help and guidance from Allah, right? But it comes down to you at making some acknowledgements within your life, acknowledging that you potentially are holding on to things that no longer apply. It's no longer a factor, but you keep making it a factor because it feels safe, because you know that story. You've lived that story. So it feels easier than the unknown, right? And that's why you're potentially holding on to it, or your brain says to you, you need to hold on to it. But in reality, at any moment, you can choose to say, you know what? Thank you, brain, for trying to protect me. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I understand that that's what you're trying to do, but it's also safe for me to choose a different path, to choose to do something differently, to choose a different way of doing things for myself. And especially, by the way, if you have some deep traumas and stuff, don't do it on your own. Just don't do it on your own. It's unnecessary. We've got so many highly skilled people out there who are so good at helping others deal with their traumas and bad experiences from their past. And it can help you process it. Because again, it's not a question of letting it go. It's a question of processing it so that you can live with it from a different perspective, where it no longer holds you back and keeps you stuck. And it's no longer an excuse for you not to go ahead and do the things that you want to do, but it's just another reason like, well, it happened and now I'm going to move on with my life. And for some people, it'll be, how can I use this as a stepping board for something better and greater, or to help other people? And for other people, it's like, well, it happened, but it plays no real relevance to me moving forward. And so it can, while it's not forgotten and it's not sort of like erased from your past, it can be easier sometimes to forget that it happened entirely, right? But it's not, but the objective here is not to erase it from your memories, not to make it a like it never existed or anything like that. I had a friend once who said, why should I go to therapy? They can't take the pain away. And I said, it's not about removing the pain, it's about processing it so you know how to deal with the pain, right? And so it's the same thing here. It's not about, removing the trauma, it's about knowing how you can live with it in a more beneficial way for you long term, right? So, but again, it comes down to you choosing not to let your past dictate your future, because at this point you can control it. You're the one who's in control of it. You're the one who's dictating your life today. So at any moment you can choose to follow what your society is telling you, but you could also choose not to. You've been given free will. So even like if saying, oh, but like I'm still influenced by society. I'm still influenced by friends. Yeah, but at any moment you can choose not to hang around with those friends. You can choose to move to a different country. You can choose to follow a niche group of people within that society. You don't have to do as everybody else does. This is free will. This is choice. This is awareness. Awareness. This a part of us where we're like, you know what? I don't have to live on autopilot. I can choose to do something different if I choose, if I want to. And so you're not a product of your environment anymore. You're a product of your choices. You're a product of your decisions. You're a product of your follow through. Okay. And again, if this episode has felt very triggering to you, maybe this is not the right time for you to hear this. And that's totally fine. On the other hand, if you feel like this did speak to you and you want to see if I could help with some of it or shifting the perspective, then you're welcome to book a one-on-one with me. If it's something that is specifically trauma related, I'm not a trauma coach or a trauma expert. So I would definitely recommend that you try and seek out an actual therapist who specializes in trauma. And take it from there, inshallah. But of course, you're more than welcome to reach out to me as well if you just want to have a quick little chat. But just keep in mind that that's just not my speciality, right? I've also had to see my therapist and work with her around certain traumas and things like that. So I've had to outsource to someone who is skilled in that kind of work, and I would recommend that you do the same thing. Okay, but absolutely do not try to force yourself to do it on your own. Journaling is great, meditating is great, breath work is great, but there is definitely something to be said about having somebody who knows what they're doing and is an expert in their field taking you through the journey. So that when something happens that can feel uncomfortable or jarring or shocking to you, you have somebody taking you through that and guiding you through it so that you don't feel hopeless or despair because it feels too overwhelming for you to continue. All right, my dear, that is what I have for you today. I hope that for those of you who are ready to hear this message today, that it triggered something in you that made you go, you know what, I'm ready to take that next step. And if that's you, then I wish you all the best of luck with it. And I pray that Allah will bless that journey for you and make it as easy for you as possible to get onto the other side of it. Inshallah, ameen. And for the rest of you who are not ready to hear it but still listen to this episode, I pray that you will soon get to the point where what I'm saying in this episode is not so triggering, but starting to make a little bit more sense for you so that you also can start on this journey for yourself, inshallah, ya Rabbi Ameen. All right, my darling, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will see you next week for another episode, inshallah. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.